Hello everyone. We're going to talk about just the basic concept of comparative advantage today. So I often talk to my students when we're face to face, and I talk about the most important document that was written in 1776. And I've taken some polls over the years, and you can see here that uh, that by far most people, when they hear 1776, they think the Declaration of Independence. But I'm going to argue that the Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith was the most important document written in 1776 because he is the father of modern economic thought, and he had this story about a pin factory, which made it the most important document. And I'll just read this to you. When he first observed the factory, he noticed that each worker was producing his or her own pins. By the end of the day, the total production by each worker was 20 pins. He stated that each worker should specialize in the production stage rather than produce his or her own pins. Through specialization, the total output by the factory increased to 48,000 pins per day. Now think about that growth through specialization and you can understand where we're headed. So this is what he saw. We're breaking down, this is called the division of labor on the assembly line process, and you can see that they broke one task into 7 different tasks, and by doing that they increased their productivity immensely. So I'm going to prove that specialization works. I'm going to name a state and you tell me what thing that state specializes in. So if I said Idaho, what would you say? You'd probably say potatoes. If I said Florida, what would you say? You'd probably say oranges. If I said Texas, what would you say? Well, if you shout it out, you'd probably say oil or cattle. And if I said Michigan, you'd probably say cars. So you can see that specialization does work. We have been using it for a long time. If we said Nevada, you'd probably say gambling or prostitution or any illegal activity you can think of. So that brings us to absolute and comparative advantage. So let's take an example. So Betty types 120 words per minute with 0 errors, and Jim types 60 words per minute with 0 errors. So who should do the typing, Betty or Jim? Well, if you realize that this might be a trick question, you need more information. If you just look at the numbers, you should definitely say Betty. She types twice as fast as Jim, right? And so Betty can type absolutely faster than Jim can. And so what type of advantage does Betty have over Jim? She has what we call absolute advantage. When you can do something faster or produce more than someone else, you have an absolute advantage. Here's a definition. One entity can produce something either faster than or greater than another entity. But I forgot to tell you, Betty is a lawyer. A lawyer earns $60 an hour, and a secretary earns $6 an hour. And so Jim is the secretary, and he earns $6 an hour. So a 600-word document has to be typed. How long does it take each person to type this document? Well, if you do your math really quick, it should take Betty about 5 minutes because she types 120 words a minute, and it should take Jim 10 minutes, right? So there's those questions. So you can see there that in this case, who should do the typing? Okay? Well, Jim should do the typing because 10 minutes of his time is 10 minutes is $6 divided by 6. So it's basically, that cost him $1 to type that document, right? But 5 minutes of her time is worth significantly more. That's worth $12, right? Does that work? Yeah. So, no, 5 into 60 is 12. Yeah. So so it's much more expensive for her to do that typing than him, so he should do the typing. And that's called comparative advantage. And so the definition is this: one entity can produce something at a lower marginal opportunity production cost than another entity. So we're going back to that original concept of opportunity cost. What are you giving up? When Betty types a document, she is giving up $12 worth of value. When Jim types a document, he's only giving up $1 worth of value. So, so you can understand that he has the lower marginal opportunity production cost than Betty, and so he should produce that document. So from this moment further, even though we need to know what absolute advantage is, we basically kick it out the door. The much more important of the two is comparative advantage. So again, we look at per unit opportunity cost. We look at the opportunity cost compared to the units gained. So assume it costs you $50 to produce 5 t-shirts. What is your per unit cost for each t-shirt? Well, it looks like it costs you $10 for each t-shirt. Now take money out of the equation. Instead of producing 5 shirts, you could have made 10 hats. Then what's your opportunity cost? Well, for every shirt you produced, you could have produced 2 hats, right? So one shirt costs you 2 hats. So it doesn't always have to be in money. It can be in other things. And that leads us to you can use this comparative advantage with a production possibilities curve, right, when you're producing 2 items. So what's your per unit opportunity cost for each hat in terms of shirts given up? Well, producing each hat costs you half of a shirt, okay? So you can see how that works. So let's do some more examples. Ronald McDonald can produce 20 pizzas or 200 hamburgers, and Papa John can produce 100 pizzas or 200 burgers. So what is Ronald's opportunity cost for producing 1 pizza in terms of burgers? Well, you do some simple division, and if he was producing 1 pizza, he would have to give up 10 burgers, it looks like. What is Ronald's opportunity cost for 1 burger in terms of pizzas giving up? Well, again, you do the division, and you can figure that out. I'm going to actually put these up here and let you pause the video and try these for yourself. So if you're doing them right, you can see that 1 pizza costs 10 burgers for Ronald. 1 burger costs 1/10 of a pizza if you divide the other way. And for Papa John, 1 pizza only costs him 2 burgers, and a burger costs him half of a pizza. So this leads to some questions. Who should produce what? Well, the person that should produce the good has a lower opportunity cost. So it's pretty simple. It looks like who should produce pizzas? Papa John gives up 2 burgers, and Ronald gives up 10 burgers every time he produces a pizza. Well, this person gives up a lot less, so they should produce the pizza. So it looks like Papa John should produce pizza, and Ronald only gives up 1/10 of a pizza when he's producing burgers, whereas Papa John gives up a whole half of a pizza every time he produces a burger. So it looks like Ronald should produce the burgers, right? And that is because Ronald has a comparative advantage in the production of burgers, whereas Papa John has a comparative advantage in the production of pizza. So, even though Papa John has an absolute advantage in pizzas because he can produce 100 and Ronald can only make 20, comparative advantage is a little bit different. It has to do with who has the lowest per unit opportunity cost. So countries should trade if they have a relatively lower opportunity cost in a certain product. They should specialize in that good that is cheaper for them to produce. Okay? So moving forward, the benefits of specializing and trading. So let's take a look at 2 production possibilities curve, which you've now been exposed to. And we're looking at 2 countries producing Cristal and rum. Okay? And we have Ireland producing Cristal and rum and Puerto Rico producing Cristal and rum. And you can see that here the production possibilities curve for the two countries, right? Ireland can produce either 1 million bottles of Cristal or 100,000 bottles of rum, and Puerto Rico can produce 80,000 bottles of Cristal or 80,000 bottles of rum, right? And then you have that point B that is somewhere in between. So which country has the absolute advantage in the production of Cristal? Well, absolute advantage, it definitely looks like Ireland does. They can produce 1 million, whereas Puerto Rico can only produce 80,000. But what about in the production of rum? Oh, it looks like Ireland still has the absolute advantage because they can produce 100,000 and Puerto Rico can only produce 80,000. But what did I tell you to do with absolute advantages? Basically, kick them out the door. We don't worry about them because comparative advantage is much more important. So, who has the comparative advantage in Cristal or in rum? To do this, there are 5 steps to figuring out which country has the comparative advantage. So, first you have to know the definition, which you should know by now, that one entity can produce something at a lower marginal opportunity cost than another entity. And the next thing is you set up a table, just like this. 1 rum equals blank Cristal, 1 Cristal equals blank rum for both countries. So if you divide by the extremes, you figure out that 1 rum for Ireland is equal to, well, let's start with Puerto Rico first. Puerto Rico is easy, right? 1 rum in Puerto Rico equals 1 ball of Cristal. That's what they give up. And 1 bottle of Cristal equals 1 ball of rum. That's what they give up. For Ireland, 1 bottle of rum, you divide by 100,000, gives you 10 bottles of Cristal, meaning every time they produce a bottle of rum, they give up 10 bottles of Cristal. And 1 bottle of Cristal equals 1/10 bottle of rum. You can see that they're always reciprocals of each other. So who should produce what? Okay? Well, you look at who's got the lower opportunity cost. So obviously, in this case, Ireland gives up 10 Cristal, Puerto Rico gives up 1, so Puerto Rico should produce the rum, and Ireland should produce the Cristal. So we decided that Ireland should produce all the Cristal and Puerto Rico should produce all the rum. So how much Cristal should Ireland produce? All of it, 1 million cases. How much rum should Puerto Rico produce? All of it. They should produce 80,000 barrels. Okay? Should Ireland just hold on to the cases of Cristal and Puerto Rico just hold on to its barrels of rum? Of course not. They should trade. And what should each country do after specialization? They should trade. And so if you look at here, we're just going to assume that Ireland takes 175,000 of its bottles of Cristal and sends them to Puerto Rico, and that they import 35,000 barrels of rum. And you can see that they gain from the trade in both Puerto Rico gains from the trade and Ireland gains from the trade. Okay? So let's look at it graphically because I think that's the easiest way to say it. If you plot this column on the graph, you can see that there it is. They've expanded their PP curve to 35,000 and 825,000, whereas Puerto Rico has expanded their consumption of rum by 5,000 because they only had to trade 35,000, but they got 175,000 bottles of Cristal, off the charts. So their PP curve is now significantly higher. So which country is obviously better off through this specialization and trade, Ireland or Puerto Rico? Well, this is a trick question. They both are. They've both expanded their PP curves because they specialized and then traded. Okay? So that is one of the first steps to understanding comparative advantage and a great place to stop.